The day I swallowed my pride and asked my parents for help, I already knew what their answer would be, but I hadn't braced myself for how they'd say it. "We already did our part with her," my mother snapped, gesturing toward the family photo on the wall. My sister Lisa beaming beside her brand new, fully paid off home. "You, on the other hand, should be grateful for what little we've done." Grateful. That word burned like acid. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was asking for the same support they had freely given my sister without her even asking. I was behind on rent after getting laid off and trying to keep my son from noticing the fridge was almost always empty. But instead of help, I got a lecture on independence responsibility and how Lisa deserved their help because she followed the path they approved of. I left their house with tears in my eyes, shame weighing heavier than ever, but it didn't last long. Because that night something inside me snapped, and what grew in its place wasn't despair. It was strategy. They wanted to call me ungrateful. Fine, I'd show them the price of rejection. And when the consequences came knocking, quiet, clever, and absolutely undeniable, neither of them saw it coming. I've never been the golden child. That title belonged to my sister Lisa long before either of us could spell it. I'm the second-born daughter of parents who wore expectations like armor that cracked only for Lisa. She was the obedient one, the polished, picture-perfect daughter, who wore pastel cardigans and called my mother twice a day just to check in. I, on the other hand, was the messy one, the loud one. The daughter who wanted to be an artist, who chose passion over practicality, who didn't want the life they had carved out for me. Growing up, it was clear how differently we were treated. When Lisa got straight A's, she was taken out for dinner. When I brought home a B in chemistry, I got a lecture about wasted potential. Lisa wanted to go to business school, my father's chest nearly puffed with pride. I wanted to go to art school, and my mother cried like I told her I was joining a cult. Still, I loved them. I tried. I buried the sting of every comparison, every eye roll, every passive-aggressive jab about how Lisa never gave them any trouble. I worked through college nights, waiting tables, never once asking them for help because I didn't want to give them another reason to label me the disappointment. I met Alex during my junior year. We were both broke and dream-chasing, me with my canvas and he with his camera. We moved in together after graduation, and for a while life was bright. We had our son Mason a year later, and although the timing was far from perfect, we were happy in that tiny apartment with its peeling wallpaper and leaky faucet. We didn't have much, but we made it work. That is until the pandemic hit and Alex's freelance gigs dried up like dust. My gallery closed, we went from scraping by to drowning. When Mason turned 4, Alex left. "It's too much," he'd said, his voice flat as he packed a duffel bag. "I'm tired of surviving." So he left and I stayed. With overdue bills, an empty fridge, and a son who asked why Daddy didn't come back. I swallowed it all just like I always had. I picked up whatever jobs I could, cleaning offices, doing food delivery, even selling some of my old art supplies to make rent. I told myself we'd get through it. I told myself I didn't need anyone's help. But the truth was I was breaking. Then came the final straw. Mason got sick. Not seriously, thank God. Just a bad case of the flu. But the fever scared me. I rushed him to urgent care only to be hit with a $400 bill. My credit card was maxed, my savings were gone. So I did the one thing I had avoided for years. I called my parents. I sat in their living room, knees pressed together, trying not to notice the smell of lavender potpourri or the fact that Lisa's wedding photo still hung above the fireplace like a shrine. "I just need help with rent this month," I said quietly, hands trembling in my lap. "Just until I get back on my feet. I'm working 3 jobs right now, but it's not enough." They exchanged a look. My father cleared his throat. "You know, sweetie, we've done so much already." My mother began, her voice wrapped in fake sympathy. "We paid off Lisa's house last year, and that really stretched us thin." "I know," I replied, trying not to sound bitter. "That's why I thought maybe—" "She has kids too," my father interrupted. "And she's always been responsible. You chose a different path." And there it was. That unspoken ledger they always kept, tallying our worth in obedience points and clean resumes. Lisa had a husband who worked in finance, a spotless house in the suburbs, a dog, a yard, a PTA badge, the complete set. And me, I had a child out of wedlock, a spotty job history, a string of artistic projects they never understood. I was chaos. "But I'm not asking for thousands," I said, voice cracking. "Just a little help to get through the month." "You need to be grateful for what you have," my mother replied coldly. You're not entitled to more just because life didn't go your way. I stood up before the tears could fall. Right, I whispered. Thanks for your time. I left with nothing except humiliation in my chest and a vow forming in my head. Because they didn't just say no. They reminded me once again that I didn't belong in their picture-perfect family frame. But I was about to become the one thing they never expected. A mirror. And when I was done, they'd be forced to look. It started with a curious itch I couldn't scratch. After the rejection, I buried myself in work in Mason, in anything that would keep me from spiraling. But something kept gnawing at me, not just the unfairness, but the weight of a deeper suspicion. Why had my parents helped Lisa so willingly, even when they'd claimed they were stretched thin? Why were they so comfortable denying me with a rehearsed air like they'd already discussed it before I even asked? A week after that conversation, while waiting in my car for a delivery order to be ready, I found myself scrolling through Lisa's social media. Her life was a curated highlight reel: kitchen remodels, Disney trips, family portraits, and matching outfits. In one video, she panned over her sparkling backyard with a caption, "Thanks to Mom and Dad, we finally got the pool we always dreamed of." My thumb froze. The pool. I hadn't heard about a pool. The post was from just 2 months ago. And suddenly, it clicked. The house they'd paid off, the help they gave Lisa, that wasn't a one-time thing. They were still helping her. Quietly, generously, lavishly. And yet they couldn't spare a dime for Mason and me. Something inside me twisted. It was more than just the money. It was the betrayal of trust. The realization that I had been begging at a locked door while they poured blessings into a room I was never welcome in. The next morning, I picked up Mason from daycare and drove him to my best friend Danny's house. Danny had been my rock through everything, divorce layoffs and emotional meltdowns included. When I told her I needed a few hours alone, she didn't ask questions. I drove straight to my parents' house. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't even sure what I was going to say. I just needed to look them in the eye when I asked why. My mother answered the door, surprised to see me. My father was in the den watching golf with his usual scotch in hand. They seemed caught off guard, as if they hadn't expected to see me again so soon after our little disagreement, as my mother later put it. I saw Lisa's new pool, I began without ceremony. Paid for by you two. My mother flinched just slightly. Well, yes, but that was... And the house, the cars, the kitchen remodel? Is there anything she pays for on her own? My father sat up, clearly annoyed. What are you getting at, Amanda? I crossed my arms. You said you were stretched thin, that you couldn't help me because you already helped Lisa. But that wasn't the truth, was it? You're still helping her, just not me. We have different relationships with our daughters, my mother said softly, as if that justified it. Lisa, she listens. She stays close. She includes us. I felt the slap in that sentence. She includes you, I repeated, voice shaking. And I don't, so I'm disqualified. You distanced yourself, my father chimed in. You made your choices, Amanda. You didn't want our advice, our rules. So yes, when Lisa asks for help, we feel more comfortable giving it. She's not resentful. My breath caught. Resentful. Of course I'm resentful, I snapped. You've turned support into a rewards program. Only the daughter who performs earns points. The rest of us, me and Mason, we're just the punishment for not living life the way you wanted us to. Silence. They didn't deny it. My mother looked away. My father took a sip of scotch. I hope one day you understand, my mother finally said. We did what we thought was right. No apology, no regret. Just the same parental shrug they always used to absolve themselves. I left before I could say something unforgivable. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Mason was curled up beside me, his tiny hand resting on my arm, and I thought about how I would never make him feel like a second-class child. Never make him prove his worth just to earn my love. But I also knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to beg again. No, that chapter was over. The next one, it was going to be calculated, cold, and it would expose every crack in the polished image they had built around Lisa. I had been silent for years, biting my tongue to preserve peace. But silence was loyalty, and they didn't deserve mine anymore. Revenge didn't come to me in one blazing moment. It came slowly, layered in observation, careful choices, and the kind of patience I never knew I was capable of. I didn't want to ruin anyone's life. I didn't want to go nuclear. I wanted something quieter, smarter, something they wouldn't see coming until it was far too late. I wanted them to understand the cost of rejecting me and my son, not just in words but in real, undeniable consequence. And to do that, I had to understand what mattered most to them. It wasn't hard to figure out. Their entire world revolved around image, status, appearances, whether it was Lisa's manicured lifestyle or their annual donation to the community garden that bought them a plaque with their names on it. Everything they did was about being seen as the perfect family. So I decided to start where their pride lived, the Neighborhood Association Gala. It was an annual event, part fundraiser, part vanity contest. My parents had chaired it for years. Lisa always showed up with her husband Mark in matching designer outfits, giving speeches about giving back. Photos from the event were always plastered on the local magazine's society page, where they could bask in the spotlight of suburban royalty. I knew because I'd been invited once years ago and never again. I didn't fit the aesthetic. A single mom with an unpredictable life and a 6-year-old who preferred dinosaurs over politeness wasn't exactly their brand. But this year, things would be different. I began by reconnecting with Claire, an old college friend who worked in local journalism and had just been promoted to lifestyle editor for that very same magazine. We'd drifted over the years, but after a few coffee meetups and genuine catch-ups, she asked me if I had any leads or stories I thought would interest readers. And that's when I laid it out. "I have something for you," I said, keeping my tone casual. "It's about favoritism appearances and how one model family has been funding a lifestyle of perfection at the cost of truth." Claire raised an eyebrow, curious. "Go on." I didn't give her names at first, just painted a picture: two sisters. One helped, endlessly praised, publicly given everything. The other dismissed, struggling, and quietly erased. But not broken. She was hooked. "I'm not asking you to write a hit piece," I clarified. "Just tell a true story about how some people wear perfection like a mask." I gave her photos, receipts, texts from Lisa's public accounts where she exaggerated her accomplishments, taking credit for charity initiatives my parents had actually funded while pretending to be a self-made woman. Claire didn't just write an article. She wrote a feature. "The Other Daughter: The Cost of a Perfect Family." It was delicate, respectful, but piercing. She never used our names, but anyone in our community would know exactly who it was about. The piece dropped 1 week before the gala, and it landed like a grenade. Lisa called me the morning it went live. I didn't answer. She texted me 3 times first, furious, then defensive, then suddenly pleading. "Did you do this? Why would you twist things like that? Mom and Dad are freaking out. They're saying it'll ruin the gala. Please, just tell me this wasn't you." I didn't respond. Because I wasn't finished. 2 days before the gala, I sent an anonymous tip to the association board. An anonymous concerned neighbor noted irregularities in how certain members of the organizing committee, namely my parents, had been allocating event funds over the years. I'd seen the paperwork once years ago when I helped my mother with mailing labels. I remembered names of vendors who were paid suspiciously high amounts for flower arrangements and audio equipment. All of them conveniently linked to friends of the family. I had screenshots, old check copies, enough to raise questions. The board launched a quiet inquiry. Just enough to freeze all financial access, just enough to stop the gala in its tracks. And when they canceled the event due to unforeseen administrative delays, my parents' pristine social standing began to crack. But the real masterpiece came last. Lisa's perfect husband, Mark, wasn't exactly known for his loyalty. That I knew for years. But I never had a reason to get involved. Until now. A mutual acquaintance from high school, Jenna, reached out after seeing the article. "You know Mark hit on me at that tech expo, right?" she said. "I thought it was weird. He was with Lisa, wasn't he?" "Oh," I replied calmly. "Tell me everything." She sent me screenshots, flirty messages, inappropriate photos, dates. The man had a second phone. I never released those messages publicly. I didn't have to. I just printed them meticulously and mailed them in an unmarked envelope to my sister. On the morning of the would-be gala, I don't know what happened between them that day, but I know Lisa didn't show up for the backup charity brunch the next week, and her social media went dark for a while. Friends say she's been going through something. As for my parents, they were embarrassed, humiliated. Their phones stopped ringing. They weren't asked to chair any new committees, and I didn't hear from them for 2 months. Not until my mother showed up at my apartment unannounced one rainy Thursday. She stood at my door, umbrella dripping, and looked tired in a way I had never seen before. "You did all this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't answer. She looked around my small but tidy apartment. Mason's drawings were pinned to the fridge. A pot of soup bubbled quietly on the stove. I read that article, she said finally. It hurt. Good, I replied. I didn't know how much we made you feel like less. You didn't want to know, I corrected. That's the difference. She looked down, lips pressed together. Your father wants to talk, he's not sure how. Neither am I admitted. But if you're here to apologize, make sure it's not because you're embarrassed. Make sure it's because you're ashamed. She nodded slowly, eyes shining. I am. Revenge didn't bring me joy, but it brought me peace, because they finally saw me, not as the ungrateful daughter, but as the mirror they never wanted to look into. After that rainy Thursday, the world didn't change overnight, but I did. I didn't wait for my parents to reach out again. I didn't follow up on my mother's apology or ask if Lisa was okay. I didn't crave their approval anymore. For the first time in my life, I didn't need anything from them, not love, not validation, not help. That was the true revenge. I spent the next few months quietly rebuilding, but this time, the foundation was mine. No more hustling 3 jobs just to keep our heads above water. No more sleepless nights wondering if I was failing my son. I didn't want to survive anymore. I wanted to live. So I made a decision that scared me in the best way possible. I opened my own small studio. It wasn't fancy, just a sunlit room above a bakery downtown that smelled like sugar and cinnamon. But it was mine. I converted the space into a little art sanctuary, part studio, part gallery, and part workshop space for single moms and kids who couldn't afford fancy art classes. I called it Second Canvas. I cashed in every connection I had, including Claire from the magazine. She did a piece on it, and that brought in local attention. Soon, people were asking to buy my art again, actual buyers, collectors, even a gallery in Portland that wanted to feature a few of my pieces in a spring exhibit. It felt surreal, like I had stepped into the life I always wanted but had been told was too risky, too unstable, too not good enough. Mason, too, began to thrive in a way I hadn't seen before. He loved the studio. He'd sit in the corner with his crayons while I painted, sometimes offering hilarious critiques like, "That horse looks like a potato." He made friends at school, gained weight back, and started sleeping through the night without waking up crying for his dad. We were okay. Better than okay. Free. I reconnected with Danny more deeply, too. She helped me build my business plan, offered to babysit when I had late nights, and reminded me that I wasn't alone, not really. She was the sister I chose, the kind of family that shows up without keeping score. One afternoon, as I was prepping for a kid's watercolor workshop, I received a text from my father. Saw the article about your studio. Looks impressive. Congratulations. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Thank you, Mason loves it here. His response came 30 minutes later. Let us know if you ever need help. It was too late for that kind of offer. But I didn't feel angry. I felt above it. The shift was undeniable. I had spent most of my life waiting for scraps of affection, crumbs of support. Now I was full while they were fumbling with the empty shell of a reputation that used to make them feel powerful. Lisa never contacted me. I don't know if she and Mark are still together. Rumors flew, of course, about marriage counseling, deleted photos, and Lisa being spotted at her old job interview downtown, but none of it reached me directly. I stayed in my lane, in my light. One day in early spring, I stood in front of a group of 10 mothers and their children in my studio, each of them holding a brush and laughing as colors bled into paper. These were women who looked tired, worn, familiar, just like I had once looked. I started the session by telling them there's no wrong way to paint your life. It just has to feel like yours. After class, one mom lingered behind. She had tears in her eyes. This is the first time my son and I have done something like this together, she said. I forgot what it felt like to create something. Thank you. Her words hit me harder than anything my parents had ever said. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. We deserve to create our own stories, especially the messy ones. And that was it. That was the moment I knew I had already won. Not by exposing my family's double standards, not by watching their social circle crumble, but by reclaiming the narrative they tried to write for me and writing a new one in my own bold, vibrant strokes. A story of survival, yes, but more importantly, a story of choice, a story of me. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, just a crisp cream envelope tucked between the usual stack of bills and flyers. I almost threw it out, but something about the handwriting made me pause, precise, slanted, familiar, in a way that made my chest tighten. Inside was a single page handwritten, short, formal, from Lisa. Amanda. There are things you don't know. I didn't want to write this. God knows I've gone over it in my head for months. But I can't move forward without telling you the truth because you deserve to know even if it changes everything. Mom and Dad didn't help me out of love. They helped me because they were afraid I'd tell you what they did. I'm sorry. Lisa. My hands trembled as I read it over and over. The vagueness, the weight of it there was something more buried underneath that tight paragraph. And suddenly I realized Lisa wasn't just reacting to the article. She was trying to unburden herself. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I called her. Her voice was flat when she answered, not angry, just tired. I didn't think you'd call, she said. You said they were hiding something. There was a long pause. I heard her exhale. Come over. I drove in silence. Every part of me screamed that this would be another emotional ambush, another twist of the knife. But something about her voice, it was different. Not the usual condescension or fake concern. When I walked into her home, I barely recognized her. No makeup, eyes red-rimmed, no curated outfit. She looked like a woman on the edge of something fragile. She poured us both tea, something she never would have done before. We sat across from each other like strangers who used to share a childhood. I didn't know how to tell you before she began, her fingers gripping the cup tightly. But the truth is, you weren't supposed to struggle the way you did. Mom and Dad promised me they'd support you behind the scenes quietly, because of what they did to your trust fund. I blinked. My what? She winced. You had one. From Grandma June. She left it for you specifically, $20,000. She set up separate accounts for both of us, but yours was different. She told them you were the one who'd need it most. You were still in art school when she passed, remember? I nodded slowly, heart hammering. I remember them saying there wasn't anything left, just some jewelry. Lisa looked down. There was more. They didn't tell you because, well, I didn't know at first either. But a few years ago, I found the statements. I saw the withdrawals. Mom used it. For Dad's medical bills back when he had that scare. For their mortgage. Then for my down payment. You're telling me, I whispered, voice shaking, that they spent my inheritance and then called me ungrateful for asking for help? Lisa nodded, tears slipping down her cheek. I confronted them. That's why they started over-gifting me. The house, the pool, the car. It wasn't generosity, it was guilt. And hush money. I didn't tell you because I was scared you'd hate me even more. I stood up, my body numb. $20,000. The difference between drowning and surviving, between begging and breathing. Gone. Used. By the people who had made me feel like a burden for asking for crumbs. Why tell me now? I asked, voice flat. She wiped her eyes. Because after what you did, after the article, after Mark, everything just collapsed. And for the first time I realized how much you were always right. You were never the problem. They were. And I let them pit us against each other. I didn't say anything, couldn't. Lisa reached into a drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were copies of bank transfer statements and an old letter from Grandma June. I recognized her handwriting instantly. Amanda is a dreamer. She sees the world differently. Don't let her go without support. I trust you to make sure she knows how deeply I believe in her. My hands clenched around the paper. Everything I'd suffered. The nights I cried into a pillow so Mason wouldn't hear. The skipped meals, the shame, the silence. All because they stole what was meant for me. And then watched me fall, pretending it was all my fault. I want you to take them to court, Lisa said suddenly. I'll testify. I'll give you everything. They have to be held accountable. But I shook my head. No. She looked confused. Why not? I looked at her, really looked, and saw someone unraveling the same way I once had. Because I'm done giving them space in my life. I don't need their money. I don't need their guilt. What I do need is to raise my son in a world where I never mirror their silence. And you need the same. Lisa cried harder then. Not the elegant, quiet tears she was raised to show, real messy sobs. I let her cry. Because finally she understood what I'd been carrying alone for years. I left her house without promises, without plans for a sisterly reunion. But I left with clarity. I wasn't the lesser daughter. I was the one who survived. A week later, a letter arrived in the mail, this time from a law firm. My parents had decided to reimburse me the amount Grandma June had left, plus a discretionary goodwill addition. I tore the check in half, and I mailed it back. With a note. I don't need your guilt money. I have everything I need. And this time you don't get to rewrite the story. Mason and I walked to the studio that afternoon hand in hand. He skipped along the sidewalk humming to himself. The sun was warm, the sky clear, and for the first time in a long time there was nothing heavy sitting on my chest. I had turned rejection into redemption, and silence into strength.